This podcast contains discussion around depression and suicide. If you're experiencing feelings of sadness, depression, or thoughts of self-harm, stop and seek help now. There is someone waiting to talk to you right now on Lifeline's crisis hotline, 13 11 14, or call 000.
This podcast may also contain unintentional coarse language and political incorrectness.
Hello and welcome to You Wouldn't Be Dead for Quids podcast with Graham Cotter, the Augathella fella. I'm Ruth, and today we have with us Tam Curtis from Tam Curtis Masculine. Tam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you, Ruth, and thank you very much for having me along.
Beautiful. And Graham, how are you doing?
Wouldn't be dead for Quids, Ruth.
That's the way. I was actually hoping to hear Tam say that. Just wanted to hear it with the Kiwi accent.
Oh, right, okay.
You wouldn't be dead for Quids.
You wouldn't be dead for Quids.
So today, yes, we have Tam with us. Welcome, Tam. Now, Tam is a men's development coach. So he studied masculinity and men's development and has developed a set of principles for men that ensures that they can create a meaningful and purpose-filled life. So let's just, Tam, if we can go back first. So originally when you left school, you did an apprenticeship, fitting and turning?
Yes, that's correct. I did a fitting and turning apprenticeship, and I worked out in the engineering industry in New Zealand for a few years and decided that I wanted to join the army. So woke up one night and I thought that was a brilliant idea, so that's what I did. Really glad that I did. I spent 13 years in the New Zealand military, went on overseas deployments to Bougainville and Afghanistan, and so I gained a lot of experience working with men and working around environments that were very masculine environments. Learned a lot.
So Tam, let's begin our discussion today by finding out what is your definition of masculinity? What does that mean?
Before we can understand what masculinity is, we should start busting some of those myths out there on what masculinity isn't. So firstly, I'd like to say that masculinity is not toxic. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. Toxic character comes from a person's character. So that means that it can be either female or male. Mm-hmm. It's nothing to do with the way that we feel about ourselves as a masculine or a feminine. Some of the other myths that I see out there is that being a dominant person is the way to becoming masculine, which is simply not true. That's simply not true. It's only one aspect of, or physical prowess is only one aspect of feeling good about ourselves. Because our masculinity and feeling masculine encompasses a lot of the things on the inside of what we are as men. And that is from building success in our life, and that will be both physical, mental, and emotional, and becoming strong in those areas, and also making a success of the things outside of our lives. And we're talking about our relationships and other types of money and all areas of our lives. Once we start to get a good grasp of what we take care of within our lives and within ourselves, and we start making success and building those to being strengths, then we start to feel masculine. Mm-hmm. And that's something that our masculinity is something that we use not just to keep to ourselves, but it's something we use to give back to our families, to give to our friends. It's a real driver of society.
Today we're going to talk about how to create a life that empowers and inspires you as a man, the basis of a man's mental and emotional health. First thing I'd like to talk about, Graham, really want to hear from you here on this one as well. Suicide kills 7 Australian men every day. So it is the number one cause of death for men under 55 in Australia. Now, what's your take on that? Why are men choosing to take their lives?
First off, just in relation to Tam and the reference to masculinity, and this is a subject that certainly needs to be explored as a topic of discussion more and more, because, not being sexist here, but in the female side of things, it's something that's everywhere, and sadly on the male side of things, it's not very prevalent, and it's critically important to make any progress somewhere. It all comes from understanding, and if you understand why men do what they do and why we are the way we are, then addressing a lot of these issues such as suicide and the like become not so much easier, but how'd you say, we have a better understanding. And
I guess one of the differences between men and women is women are very good at talking and talking about their feelings, but men
it's
don't feel that safe.
No, that's exactly right, Ruth. And I can, as a case in point, and that's where I finished up, where I nearly did, because I didn't talk about it. And that's one of the most, probably the most, since on my reflection in recent times, was the most obvious one, was that I didn't discuss it, and so important. But the issue with suicide generally, right across the board, is for me personally, we're on a slippery slope in that area unless we do something fairly profound and start to focus on how we are and who we are and how we think. We've got to train our young people in particular to think better and think better about themselves, because that's where most of the issues come from.
What do you think the biggest mental and emotional struggle for men is?
I think it's a culmination of things, Ruth. The world we live in is changed. Pretty basic. When I'm nearly 70 now, and what I say to people is I grew up in blissful ignorance, whereas the world we live in today is social media and all the rest of it, and just the the stuff that just keeps coming at you is becoming more profound, and we need to be able to have the mechanisms to filter that, and that's why mindfulness is one way, a very powerful way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that too. Moving forward into the future, the thing that I see quite a fair bit is people losing what their purpose and their direction is. Mm-hmm. And it's just, as Graham said, we're becoming more complex in the things that we need to be responsible for and to deal with in life, that we miss out on a lot of that opportunity of just being able to be ourselves and develop ourselves and our personal character. What I find with a lot of the men that I work with is that that's what they've lost, is their purpose and their direction, whether it be through failures in marriage or business or a dislocation from their children, or it might even be that middle of life, where am I going, what am I doing with life? And you find that they suffer a fair bit from mental and emotional health issues just because of that question.
Mm. And so to answer that question, how do you create a life that empowers and inspires you as a man?
I guess just to follow on what Tam was saying there, Ruth, is that at the end of the day, as part of the rapid transformational therapy process, and is the fact that most of who we become is that programming and that die was cast when we were in our younger years, and that programming that sort of drives us and to who we are was pretty much put in place from conception to seven, and it's in that period of time where most of our who we are and how we are, that die was cast in that period of time.
Mm-hmm. Rapid transformational therapy is very, very good at taking you back to release that past and to be able to move on, to embrace a future. But how do you do it? How do you create your future, Tam?
Understanding what men's life cycle development is. So this is a theory that goes back to the 1920s, I think, a man named Erik Erikson. And he developed all the major questions that men will come across throughout their lives. Actually, it applies to females as well. The questions are slightly a bit different for females than they are for males, being that we're different creatures and have different wants and needs. So when we start to understand what those questions are, if we can identify them and understand them, and we can start to answer those questions, we can start to look into the future and decide what it is that we want from our future, working in alignment with them, because like it is, you can't, to being a man and then choose you want to be a rabbit. That's just not sensical. It's not realistic. So, but understanding what us men are going to go through and how to align a future or our future selves, see our future selves and work towards that. So it requires personal development right throughout your life. But that's a good thing for men because we need it. That's the basis of making us mentally and emotionally strong and healthy, is that we continue to develop ourselves right throughout our lives. It never stops for us.
Graham, as you know, one of his jobs is as a Schitt's Creek tour guide because he's been up there a little bit himself. You know, and one of the things we talk about, when do you know that you're up Schitt's Creek, and when is it time to stop paddling? When do you know that when it's time to change?
From a Schitt's Creek tour guide point of view, I guess when you're just worn out, you're worn out paddling, or you realise you're not in a good place mentally, emotionally, and just right across the board, and depression is one big screaming red flag that should tell you that you need to change something in your life.
Yeah, for most men, when they realise from a philosophical point of view that they need to make changes in their lives, that question has happened a long time before they've got to that point, and it's not so much a question as it is a feeling on the inside of them. So a whisper it is, and it's very quiet at first, and we don't recognise it, but then that swirl of it on the inside when you haven't found an answer to it, and it gets louder and it gets louder and it gets louder. And we used to call this a midlife crisis. Men used to have their midlife crisis, where they get to that point and then they go out and buy a sports car, or they buy themselves a motorbike, and people were wondering, oh, he's just going through a midlife crisis. He's got a question on the inside of himself that he hasn't looked at properly. And the question's not so much a question, as I said, it's a feeling. It's that feeling of I've come this far in life, and now I'm transitioning from being youthful to being a more mature man. You know, where am I going? What am I doing? What does my life consist of? What's it going to be towards those latter parts of the year? So that's about the midway question. Firstly, don't ignore the question. When you know there's that kind of stirring on the inside of you, that question is coming on the inside of you, don't ignore it. No need to jump on it straight away and have an answer straight away. It's something that we need to sit with, think about, decide what we want to be and what we want to do.
But if you suddenly get the feeling that you need to buy a Harley Davidson, is that the time where you can say, oh, I feel like, if I had that, then my life would be perfect. And as, Graham often says, like, the answers are not on the outside. All the answers are.
They're on the inside, Ruth. There, sort of our own personal happiness and what have you is a door that opens within, not without. So not from the outside, it opens from the inside. So, and that's critically important. You're not going to find the answers on the motorbike or whatever, and fast car or the new young blonde or whatever. It's you're not going to find them there.
We're not saying don't buy the Harley Davidson, obviously, but we are not sponsored by them.
Yeah. What I'd add to that is that it's time to actually reflect on who you are. So rather than making rash decisions like, yeah, sure, if having that motorcycle was something you actually dreamed of all your life, then yeah, why not? If you've got the resources to do it, and it doesn't affect your life in any other ways, relationship wise or financial wise, then yeah, sure, do it. But it's when you start wanting to change everything about your life, you haven't answered the question, jumping at things, and you're panicking, or you're buying something to replace something else, and it's generally that answer that you don't have on the inside of yourself that you're feeling uncomfortable about.
And so what's the next step? We recognise that we can see that something is not quite there. Is this all there is? We buy the motorbike, is this all there is? What's the next question you ask yourself to start finding that direction?
I guess, Ruth, just listening to Tam there, and the rapid transformational space that I play in is one of the profound common reasons for people feeling down and lost and all that is they don't feel enough. When you don't feel enough, good enough, or no matter what, in every aspect of your life. And I guess that's where you finish up in that space, in that midlife. Would that be right, Tam?
Yeah, definitely is. And we get there, because what we were talking about before, men don't talk about these sorts of things because it's not kind of the done thing for us to talk about, not necessarily our feelings, but our emotions. So feelings and emotions are, while they work together, they're two different things. So men need to be careful about their emotional buying. They're pretty, that's what gets us that's what we do when we change our lifestyle up. We're making decisions on emotions. But at that point of...
I'll just kick in there. What I was going to say was just to add to what you were saying about, that emotional side of things. when I did a life coaching training course, part of that was emotional awareness, and it was a topic that I really struggled with actually, and there was a 2-day workshop on it. I dragged my feet in the initial part of it because it was foreign to me. I felt really uncomfortable, but now realise the power of that. And one of the things that I do with people is, blokes in particular, is say, well, and I do it with myself, is close your eyes and feel where the feelings are. You know, how do you feel inside? Where do you feel it? Do you feel it in your chest, in your stomach, or whatever? And it's the 3 A's. It's awareness, what you're feeling, acknowledgement that it's there, the fact that you need to articulate it as well. So, awareness, the understanding, the acceptance that it's there, and that being able to articulate it is, and it's not easy as a bloke, I can tell you that now. It really isn't. I struggle with it. I'm fine with it now, but it's something that I had to work on.
In terms of being able to say what you
how
are
I
feeling.
feel. Yeah, how I'm feeling.
Yep. I'm really keen to know, as a woman, if you had one message to share with women about men, because, you are from Mars, what do you want women to know about men?
Men we're complex creatures, not complicated. We're complex creatures. There are a lot of moving parts going on inside us all the time, inside our thinking and inside the way that we feel. We're comfortable with that. We're okay with it. The reason why we don't talk to you or express things to you is because we're going to figure it out first. We're going to be okay with that. Then we'll let you know. And maybe it might just be it's fine. But when we say that, we mean it. It's fine. I've got it sorted.
Do we, though? Because we're just talking about the fact that, you're not articulating it. Is no, I'm fine, is that just not articulating it?
We have this thing inside of us that we need. It's something that we work with all the time, or working to build all the time, competence. And if we don't feel competent, then we're not going to give it over. We're not going to express it. If we feel that incompetent about it, we're not even going to start it. We're going to stop and we're going to gather information first. We're going to make a decision because that's how we're built. We need to do this. So to ask us 50% of the way through something we don't know actually what we're doing, we can't actually give you an answer on what it is because we can't see further into the future on how it's going to turn out.
Oh, my God, that's gold. Competence.
Yeah, competence. It's what a man works for all his life, is to be competent. Even when we retire from work, we're still working to be competent because the knowledge that we gain and the truth that we know about things is what we give back to our young men.
Does it help for a woman to reinforce the fact that you're competent?
If it's truthful, yes. But if it's truthful, we already know that.
Good one, Tam.
So if you had a message, Graham, for women about men, what would it be?
For me personally, it's as Tam said, I mean to say, I've got something to say, I'll say it when I'm ready, but please take the time to listen.
Ah, yes.
Just go back to competence, to say, I remind myself values are pretty important. They're a critical part of who we are as male or female, but, I remind myself every morning of my values, which is integrity, commitment, competence, compassion, and just added fun. So, so those values are what I like to say are my drivers.
Kind of get you guys a bit more now.
Cool. Yeah, there's a
Wow.
Yeah, men's values, virtues, morals, and ethics is a deep philosophical conversation, and I feel that that's the conversation us men should be having. There's no way we can resolve that all in probably not even in 1 to 2 generations, but it builds an understanding of what is on the inside of men, what drives us, what do we strive for, and men being in an alignment with that and teaching other men about it. I think this is one of the pathways to men becoming mentally and emotionally healthy.
Well, you mentioned there about generations, and that was a question I wanted to ask. I asked about message would you give women about men. What message would you give parents of boys?
Let them have difficulties. Let them experience difficulties. let it happen. I don't mean putting them in dangerous situations that are life-threatening or anything like that, but men need struggles. We do need them, not to the point that they become traumatic or even give us personality disorders and things like that. It's a bit going a bit beyond. But definitely for boys to feel what struggle is and for them to build that, it helps them build their own competence as a young man, and it gives them a sense of strength on the inside that they can overcome difficulties. They've got the power to overcome difficulties. We take that away from young boys and they'll stay boys all their lives. It's
a case in point. And I guess, Ruth, just to follow on from that, Tam, I always say that one of the most precious gifts my parents gave me was the freedom to make mistakes and know that they're always there when if I needed them, if I sort of really cocked up, and I'd go and just say I need help, and it was there. It was just such a precious thing. We all stuff up and make pretty poor judgments and all that sort of stuff, but to know someone has got your back is so important, so critically important to you, mate.
I feel like this is just the absolute start of a conversation. I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface, but we are actually done for this week. Thank you, Tam, for being here with us today. Now, if you would like to have a discussion with Tam, you can look at Tam Curtis on LinkedIn, Tam Curtis Masculine on both Facebook and Insta. Maybe start to follow Tam, but also feel free to absolutely send him a message if you want to continue on the conversation. And of course, our Schitt's Creek tour guide here. If you find yourself up there, it's time to stop paddling and have a chat with Graham. So you can find Graham at kissbusiness.com.au, but also on Facebook as Graham Cotter, the Augathella fella, and on LinkedIn. And we'll put some of those links in the description. If you've got a comment to make, please leave it. We would love to hear from you. And now, Graham, what have we got coming up in episode 2?
Have a look at addictions, Ruth. See if we can't understand that as well.
Oh, I've got plenty of them. Plenty of them.
I think you and I and everyone else.
Tam, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And we will talk to you in episode 2.